Hello everybody, today we're going to be getting into this video really quickly because last time I didn't make much progress with it, so this time I do want to make progress with it. I'm not going to start off talking about anything. I'm not even going to talk about the fact that I'm not wild about how my hair's looking today and the fact that I'm planning on getting a haircut this week, but then it's one of those things where it's just like, it's so easy to put off getting a haircut. That's literally that's why I grew my hair in the first place. Because it is just so easy to put off getting a haircut. I'm not going to pretend the whole time I was putting off getting a haircut, but oh my lord. Anyway, alright, let's actually jump into it. This person, Sentient Darkness is the name of the channel, did a response to a response that I did to them responding to me. Good, we're all clear on that. You know, watch the last video if you want the details, but like I said, I'm going to try and just actually make some progress with it.
He prefaces his response with this.
Just for the record, I'm not that comfortable talking about the whole science thing. That's true, yeah, I don't really care about the science thing, I will talk about it, sometimes, but it doesn't matter, right? The science thing really doesn't matter because the main question is a philosophical question about what should be the referent for how we define the categories of man and woman. It's really that simple. Because the point is trans ideologues don't think it should be science. So, okay, but let's see. Trans-identified people, even after they've been through medical transition, still have higher rates of suicide than people who are not trans-identified. So, immediately that suggests it's not exactly a perfect solution by any means.
This isn't at all like what he proposes he actually meant.
Well, it kind of is. I'm saying it's not a perfect solution. Trans identity, what trans ideologues will claim is that people with gender dysphoria are suffering, and that's why we all need to affirm trans identity. What I would claim is that there is a wider context of mental health issues in our society, and that should be the focus. And look, if someone did ask me, what actual practical things do you think should be done? And what is your evidence that would work? I refuse to talk about it. Anyone tells me, oh, there's evidence that shows that, transition is the best way to help trans people. I refuse to talk about it because you're completely ignoring the fact that I'm arguing there is a wider societal problem. You can't say in clinical trials, a fundamental reshaping of how we as a society view gender has proven to be ineffective because you can't have a clinical trial about a fundamental. So that's just the issue. And of course, that's just specifically gender, but I think we've got a wider mental health issue in the society. So what I'm saying is, let's first of all make some changes to society that I think would make things better for mental health. And second of all, make some changes to society that I think would make people less neurotic about the concept of gender more generally. And then within that context, we can have a conversation about, actually does transition, is that the best solution? What we can't do is have this current society, which is crap in many, many ways when it comes to people's mental health, and also crap in many, many ways when it comes to the obligations and the anxieties people feel about gender. And in this society say, well, we did some studies and it turns out that conforming to gender basically, and if you're a gender non-conforming man deciding you're in fact a woman is the best solution for people. Well, that doesn't surprise me at all. Oh, we did some studies and it turns out that personal solutions to people having anxiety and depression are the best thing. So if someone's got anxiety and depression about their body, then the best thing for them to do is to personally change their body or change how they regard their body. Yeah, I don't doubt that in our current society, but you're ignoring the obvious thing, which is, well, what about we change our society? Now, with that said, if you're going to then come up against me and say, no, I'm not going to entertain the idea that we should instead be looking towards wider societal solutions to these problems, you would have to be saying that the alternative you're offering is so good that we don't even need to think about the idea there could be a better solution. And trans identity is not so good that we don't need to think about another solution. It still leaves a lot of people miserable. It still leaves a lot of people likely to take their own lives. It's a bit like trans identity. It's a bit like my attitude towards environmentalism, where most of the things that I would support regarding how we should change society regarding trans identity are things I would pretty much support anyway, because I think they would just make society better. Things like, just off the top of my head, massively increasing funding in the NHS so that everybody can get free psychological counselling without having to wait on a massive waiting list. There we go. I would support that anyway. Regardless, take trans identity off the table, I still support that. Things like, what am I thinking? 15-minute cities. That's an environmental thing as well. But I also think it's really good for people's mental health. That basically, rather than being isolated from a lot of what you need to survive and having to get in a car and drive, you basically live in an environment more akin to a village where everything you need is walking distance and easily cycling distance away from you. That is nice. And I say this as someone who, for the most part, that's what I experience. The UK in general, as is most of Europe, is much better than America in this regard, and North America more generally. I've been to Canada, and that's equally as much as a depressing hellhole. This is a slight aside, but my wife and I got married in Canada, and for reasons which I can't be able to get into because this is already a tangent, we ended up staying in Canada. This was over the summer when I didn't make any videos. We were staying in Canada in an Airbnb for 2 months. For 1 month. We were in Canada for more like 2 months, but it's because we then went traveling for a little bit after that. But we're in the Airbnb for 1 month. I could not have anticipated how bad that would be for my mental health. Why? Because it was a hellish nightmare suburb, and we didn't have a car. So you just felt completely isolated, because in 10 miles in any direction, there was nothing but bland, lifeless suburban sprawl. It was horrible. I compare that to where I am right now in this house. There is so much variety in terms of environments, and there's parks, and there's woods, and there's lakes. There's just so much going on within easily walking distance of me. And that's good for your mental health. But again, sorry, that was a massive tangent. But the point is, I'm talking about how so many aspects of our society, from the way our economy is organized to the basic infrastructure we have, and the way that the infrastructure we have impacts how we're supposed to live our lives. So many things are negatively affecting our mental health. We should fix those things anyway. And once we do fix them, I don't know how many people are going to be super depressed because they think they've got the wrong body. I think it would drop. That's basically where I'm coming from. And again, I'm much more comfortable coming from that when the alternative these people are offering is, well, what we're offering will significantly reduce your chances of taking your own life, but still, trans-identified people are far more likely to do that than anyone else. And that's a problem, right?
Now to his claim that a trans identity has negative long-term psychological effects. Just like any truth claim, it has to be proven.
What do you mean it has to be proven? Obviously, trans identity very frequently leads to dysphoria, which is literally an anxiety and depression about the nature of your body. That is a long-term negative effect. And the solutions to that, things like medical transition, well, we know that has negative physical side effects. I don't see how anyone can deny that trans identity has negative effects. So I guess you could say, oh, prove it. Well, listen to trans people and their experiences. Their experiences are not pleasant or happy.
It is people being unsupportive, harassing, assaulting, and generally discriminating against them. We have a great amount of evidence that these actions increase suicide rate, whereas we don't have any evidence supporting that trans identity itself is causing negative psychological effect.
Okay, so that's the obvious response, right? Well, what's causing this is people being negative or attacking them. Okay, you can't just make people suddenly not be bigots anymore, right? Like, if people are going to be mean to trans-identified people, that's not solved. Like, there's no solution there. There's no way to magically make that go away. And considering the fact that it's already pretty infrequent, those kind of things, like most people aren't attacking trans people on the streets, I don't see how you can act as if the small amount that I guess is causing enough of an issue to cause people taking their own lives I don't see how you can imagine that we could meaningfully stop that, when it's just going to be like what trolls online making mean comments and things like that. The other issue, of course, is that a lot of what bothers trans people is not having their identities accepted. The problem is, well, you can't force me to accept something in order to make someone's life better if I don't think that thing is actually true. So that's not a solution. If someone's going to take their own life because they believe that 2 + 2 = 5, then everyone believing 2 + 2 = 5 is not a solution, because you can't force people to believe something that they know isn't true. When you look at what trans identity is, it's a belief that your body fundamentally is wrong. So that seems like something which is going to carry with it a lot of internal senses of negativity that may be exacerbated by people around you saying bad stuff. But to suggest, well, this person's really upset because they fundamentally believe their body is wrong and the nature of their body just causes them intense distress. What you're basically telling me is if we all agree that their body is wrong, then they'll be happy. It's like, no, that makes no sense at all.
It's like saying that being gay or bisexual or lesbian has negative psychological effects, because people who are gay, bisexual or lesbian have a greater suicide risk. The point is that
if you're a gay person, you don't have to think that your body is wrong, right? There is no, in any sense, intuitive reason to think, well, because I'm attracted to biological males, that therefore means it's terrible that I myself am a biological male. Why would you think that? Why would anyone think that? There's no argument for that. Whereas, if you believe in trans identity, you are literally saying, my body is wrong. The body I have is the wrong body, and it's fundamentally not okay that I am physically who I am. That is literally what trans identity is. That's not what it is with being gay or lesbian. A lesbian's like, yeah, I'm a woman and I like to do stuff with other women. Cool. Cool. But that, like, there's no, whereas a woman who says, oh, I'm a man deep down, but I have a female body, so I need to start taking hormones and chopping stuff off my body to make my body slightly better. Again, I can only say that is fundamentally a obvious mental health issue in itself, in a way that being lesbian or gay isn't.
For King Critical to say, let's challenge this idea at its core, he'd have to show that a gender non-affirmative treatment works better at decreasing the suicide rate of trans people who want to transition. He has no such evidence on this topic.
Because if you're challenging something at its core, you can't just casually do that in a clinical trial. It's a very stupid objection, because it fundamentally closes off any complex consideration of other ways that we could tackle problems, again, at their core. Not all problems can be solved working within the current society we have, and therefore, when it comes to those being solutions, we have to be a bit speculative, because we can't just do a little test. We can't do a test where we say, what if society was fundamentally different from how it is? How could you test that? If we simplify it a bit, and this is a simplification because, again, the problem isn't really an individual thing. It's about wider society and the whole thing we do with gender as a society. But, the question would be, well, if you had two people and one was raised completely in a trans-affirming way, and the other one was raised to be like, hey, you can be as gender non-conforming as you like, you can express your gender in any way, but you have to recognize the reality of your biological reality. Well, which one of those is going to have the better health outcomes? I would suspect it's going to be the latter, but the problem is that's really hard to tell, because when you're talking about such a nuanced mental health issue, people can just deny that the latter actually is authentically trans. They can be like, well, that person wasn't really trans, and that's why for them it was okay. Like, that's when detransitioners come out and say, hey, I identified as trans, but I realized that was actually bad for me, and it was better for me to accept myself as I am, and usually detransitioners continue to be gender non-conforming in some ways. So to accept myself as I am, to, be gender non-conforming because that's how I want to express myself, but to recognize that doesn't fundamentally change whether I'm a man or woman. The issue there is that's not taken as evidence that basically trans identity, or there are alternatives to trans identity that are viable. That's just taken as, well, that's that person's unique situation. When you actually think it through, you're like, well, this would be a very difficult thing to prove. But just because something's difficult to prove doesn't mean we shouldn't pursue it, or it shouldn't be legitimate to suggest it as an option, considering, like I say, that the solution being offered by trans activists is far from a perfect solution.
Based on the 2016 USTS report, participants who had a professional try to stop them from being transgender were far more likely to currently be experiencing serious psychological distress, more likely to have attempted suicide, nearly 3 times as likely to have run away from home.
Okay, so the massive issue there is that it's not clarifying what's meant by had a professional tried to stop them from being transgender. Also, you notice it says try to stop them, so that doesn't necessarily mean it's successful. More likely to have attempted suicide, 58%, than those who did not have the experience, 39%. Bear that in mind, because what's my main argument? My main argument is, if you're going to tell me that what I'm saying, which is not, hey, if anyone ever tries to stop anyone from being transgender, that's going to be fantastic and solve all the problems. No, I'm saying there needs to be a specific, sympathetic therapy a lot of the time. I mean, let me talk about what actually I want in broad terms. Again, I've already said about the whole kind of mental health thing. I think there's so many ways we could restructure society to make people happier in general. Let's ignore that for a second, because that is a much wider discussion. Let's just talk more specifically about transgender. I think there's 2 things we want. One is, as a society, to completely and thoroughly normalize the idea of diverse gender expression while totally repudiating and rejecting the idea that trans identity can be valid, to make it absolutely clear to everyone that there is no connection between the two. That in schools, in legislation, in the media, there is a message reinforced: if you are a man, if you're a biological male, you can wear a dress, you can be gay, you can cry, you can do all these things to not be stereotypically masculine, to present yourself how you want to present yourself, running the full gambit from just, the stuff that all men should really be doing, like, for example, crying and, being emotionally vulnerable, to the stuff which, cross-dressing, things like that, which is, I mean, I would argue often fetishistic and stuff like that, but, people are allowed to have fetishes. We're not going to be too Puritan about that. But, men can do all this stuff, but a man can never be a woman. Make that really clear. That's step 1. And at that point, what objection could someone have? It's like, oh, I'm trans. Well, what does that mean? Because you can do everything. There's nothing you can't do. The only thing you can't do is say this thing about yourself. Okay, whatever. But then the other thing is therapy for specific individuals that reinforces that and is absolutely compassionate, is saying, well, okay, what can you do to, in terms of exposure therapy, to cope with the fact that you are necessarily, inescapably, a man if you're biologically male, a woman if you're biologically female, you're not non-binary because those things don't exist, these are what words mean. That therapy that is, again, completely compassionate, completely, not saying, you're a man, that means you need to start playing sports and liking guns. I'm not saying as long as somebody at some point tries to stop you being trans, then that will obviously create solutions, because I don't think it will. But here's the thing. This guy is objecting to that. He's saying, oh, look, I have some evidence against you. 39%. In this person's statistics, 39% of people who never have any professional try to stop them being trans. 39% still take their own lives, still attempt to take their own lives. And you want to tell me that I'm wrong for thinking, well, let's try something else? That's insane. In a society where it comes to be accepted that you can be a progressive liberal left-wing person and still oppose trans identity, more such people will seek out this treatment. But in our current society, it's generally held to that if you oppose trans identity, you are a conservative, traditionalist bigot. And what does that mean? Well, it means that people who care about being a conservative, who care about not being a conservative traditionalist bigot, are going to be very resistant to seeking out so-called conversion therapy when it comes to trans identity. Whereas the people who are going to be like, yeah, let's do it, are going to be people who don't really care about that, probably because they already own the fact, bigot's a bit of a charged term, but already own the fact that they are conservative and traditionalist. So the vast majority of trans-identified individuals who are going to be being sent to a professional to try to stop them being transgender are going to be people who come from conservative traditionalist households. The question is, for the minority, but I think growing number of people who are progressive and liberal and, broadly very tolerant, who just recognize that trans identity is not a good thing for children or for anyone, and is something that, if it is possible at all to guide kids and, even older people away from trans identity, that's something that should be done. Are those people going to have kids who feel this way? Probably not. What I'd be interested in is a study of the number of parents who send their kids to a professional to try to stop them being trans who are gay affirming. Because I'm betting the number's pretty low. But again, that's the issue, because what I'm suggesting in terms of making things better about trans identity would only work if the wider society and the parents and, the professionals are broadly tolerant of everything that they should be tolerant of, like same-sex attraction, which of course is not intellectually incorrect, and nor is it morally wrong. So that's the issue. You're comparing, well, what's the word? There's a sampling error here, is basically what I'm building up to. The sampling error being that in our current society, it's overwhelmingly going to be conservative traditionalists who send their kids to these areas. And I imagine gender non-conforming children living in a conservative traditionalist household in general are going to have issues. Sorry, there's a slight noise.
It's almost like we're doing the same song and dance we had with gay people. And
actually, you know what? The whole thing about 39% as well is this guy's argument is that, well, it's because of all the bigotry these people face. But again, think this through. How much bigotry do these people actually experience? The number of trans-identified individuals who get physically attacked is incredibly low. Lower than, disproportionately low. Which would suggest, unless everyone's just limiting it to teasing or whatever, it would seem that the amount of bigotry they're receiving can't be that high. I don't think you can possibly say it's enough to, justify 39%. I mean, what I'd be interested to see, and maybe I'll actually try to find this out because I am actually interested, rates of attempted suicide amongst homosexual youths in UK. Let's see. Every single article, it's LGBTQ+, LGBTQ+, LGBTQ+. Found this from UCL London, LGB adults at higher risk of suicide. See, what I'm interested in, I can't find the statistic, and I'm just gonna, but essentially this is my suspicion, and I'd be surprised if this wasn't borne out in the statistics. My suspicion is that gay people probably commit suicide at a way lower rate than trans-identified people. Gay people experience way more bigotry and discrimination, right? Like, I remember at school, kids were bullied, teased or whatever, for being gay. But I don't remember any kid being bullied for being trans. Now, you could say, well, that's because, even though trans people have always existed, for some reason there were just none of them around when I was at school, and that is true, to be fair, none of them were around when I was at school. But, whereas gay people actually have always existed, unironically, so they've always been around. But even now, I would think that gay people do face more discrimination than trans-identified people, and yet gay people have a lower rate of suicide. Why? Because it's not always, or it's not entirely, the bigotry that's causing that. It's going to be one's sense of self. And for trans identity, because of the fundamental nature of what trans identity is, as I've already stressed, it's going to lead to a higher rate.
What King Critical originally said is the following.
When I look at trans-identified people. A word that... So I know this what I'm saying here. Basically, this is a clip of me saying that trans-identified people don't seem very happy, right? Like, that's it. That's pretty much all I said, which is true. You know, like, what did they talk about? Gender euphoria. And I don't know the exact word I'm going to say here. Maybe the word's going to be happy, maybe the word's going to be content, but here's another word I don't think of when I see trans-identified people. Euphoria, right? Most of the time, they're complaining, they're sad, they're miserable. ContraPoints, one of the most prominent trans-identified people, addicted to opiates. This is, like, it just doesn't make any sense, right? Because these don't seem to be people who are living their best lives by any means.
You cannot just claim something like that based on your personal experience because it's compatible with the fact that medical transitioning is an effective treatment for trans people, and that it isn't like a drug and doesn't have long-term negative effects.
Okay, so let me see if I can work this out. Essentially, he said you need to provide evidence or something, and I said, well, that's implying that I made a stronger claim than I did. And now he's saying, no, you didn't make or you know, you did make a strong claim, and therefore you do need to provide evidence. I don't think I did make that strong of a claim. All I said was trans people don't seem that happy, so it doesn't seem to me that, based on that, trans identity is actually a path to happiness. Now, you know, what's the solution there? The solution would be, and you know, like, I know there are lots of people who don't do this, but I think that I live a reasonably aspirational life. Things like, it's just basic things like, you know, having a healthy diet, regular exercise, a consistent sleeping pattern, you know, working hard, stuff like that, which I think is an indication that you're generally doing a good job in life. Trans-identified individuals, I'm not aware of any such example of somebody who's got that attitude. I mean, ContraPoints, again, famously hardly does any work on YouTube, produces basically no content at all for a YouTube channel, that gets huge amounts of money from it, and is still so depressed. Like, I've said this before, if you had infinite money, you could so easily, like, just as a basic thing, right? Okay. There was I recently got a free trial at a fancy gym, like, I guess more accurately, a leisure center. And I was like, oh, you know, yeah, definitely. Obviously, I'll give that a go. I did that. And what is great is you can, like, work out at the gym, and then you can go into the sauna and just relax your muscles. And it is the most incredible experience ever. But I can't afford that. I can't afford that leisure center. Even if I was making way, way, way more money than I am making, a leisure center is pretty down low on the list of things that I would do. However, ContraPoints is making huge amounts of money. And just in general, you know, I know that depression, things like that, it's a very internal thing. I have mental health issues. So, you know, I don't think anyone can accuse me of being ignorant on this point, but it just seems so obvious to me that if you have infinite money, and the consequence of having infinite money is that you don't really need to work, you can do so much of like ContraPoints could just casually, on a whim, during the many, many months of presumably not doing any work at all, fly to Bhutan or Nepal or Tibet and just go on a month-long meditation retreat in a luxury, like, 5-star hotel that's tricked out to look like a Buddhist temple and just have, like, you know, East Asian kind of Zen vibes everywhere. And just, you know, chill and just meditate and do yoga. Go on a yoga retreat to Bali or whatever. Go to Bora Bora and just live in, or like one of those, you know, kind of Polynesian islands where it's just insanely luxurious to the degree that, plebs like us will never experience. I have very, very little sympathy for people with infinite money who are still not able to do obvious things they could do that will improve your life. It will make you happier. But ContraPoints just does drugs. That's what ContraPoints has decided to do to become happy. I mean, Jesus, I'm thinking to myself, there are actually some trans-identified people I know personally. I'm not going to name them, but there are trans-identified people I know personally. Obviously, a lot of them aren't exactly friends with me, but I know of them, and I know of how they're doing in their lives. Do you think any of them are doing what, there are a lot of people I know, I surround myself with very aspirational people. As an aspirational person myself, I surround myself with a lot of aspirational people. There's lots of people I know who go to the gym, who have consistent sleeping schedules, who stay hydrated, who just do, again, these aren't big things, but it's just the basic things that show you're on top of your life. It's not just that the trans-identified people don't happen to be like that, it's that they're the exact opposite. It's that everything I know about them, again, not from being the best of friends with them, unsurprisingly, but just from knowing them generally, they are just completely floundering in terms of every aspect of their life. Not specific things to trans identity, just everything about it. There's trans identified people who I know, who I even have on social media apps and stuff, and I'll wake up at 6:40 in the morning. And if I don't usually check social media particularly early, but if for some reason I do, every now and then, I'll see, they were last online 2 hours ago. So they were up at 4 in the morning. And guaranteed it's not because they were out partying. It's because they were, basically lying, probably online or something. But that's the thing. And it's those types of people. So, to me, is it anecdotal? Yeah, it's anecdotal. But it's anecdotal, but it's also 100% guaranteed an accurate reflection of reality. If trans-identified people want to change my mind on that, they're going to have to really start doing something to show that they are actually living their best lives, because there is no indication, not even the slightest beginnings of an indication, that trans identity is part of anybody living their best life and being the best person they can possibly be.
A gay identity is supposed to lead to fulfillment, but if that's the case, then you'd expect gay-identified people to seem really contented. And yet, I see gay people not being content and talking about how they're depressed all the time.
Okay. You know what? My electric... I don't know if you can hear this, you probably can. My electric toothbrush is decidedly on the way out. It's been randomly turning on. Anyway, sorry. So, okay. Essentially, I want to point this out right away. He made the analogy to being gay. Here's the issue. With gay people, it's the exact opposite. I would say one of the main arguments, I've said this before about the whole gay thing. I completely understand people who are anti-gay based on the fact that they do not like a lot of what's going on in gay culture, which is to say, there have been studies that show that the average gay man has had over 1,000 sex partners in his life, which is insane. But I can understand somebody saying, well, that's morally offensive to me to imagine that level of promiscuity. And yeah, I get that completely. So, but what I always do is I say, okay, let's take all the, unironic degeneracy out of the equation. What about you've got a suburban house, two professional, well-dressed, well-groomed, successful men who are in a relationship with each other, who are married, who are committed to each other. What is the problem with that? And no one can give me an answer to that. So if you want to be against gay culture, I can understand that. Yeah, there's lots of things about gay culture that are bad, and literally deadly when you talk about things like AIDS and stuff like that. But if two gay men are in a relationship together and they are successful and presenting an image of basically being aspirational. I like that word. I think it is a good word to use. The kind of people who you look at and be like, wow, they've really got everything together. What possible reason could you have to object to that? But the thing is, you know why I can make that analogy? Because it's really actually quite common. While yes, there is that thing in the gay community of gay people who are not living a life that you could say is particularly creditable, you do have a pretty wide number of examples you can look at where there are gay people who are clearly living a life that is impressive, where you would say, wow, they've really got everything together. They've really got everything going on there. You know, they seem really happy. I would expect that if I moved into a suburban neighborhood and there was a gay couple there, then if I went round their house, it would be really neat. And, they probably go to the gym. They probably got a fridge stocked with all sorts of delicious Whole Foods and things like that. It's a bit of a stereotype, but it's a stereotype that seems to be true, that a lot of gay people, like I say, really take care of themselves and things like that. So this analogy is hilariously inaccurate, because with gay people, it's pretty much the opposite. Again, if someone said, hey, I've got this non-binary friend, do you want to come around their house? I'd be like, oh God, let me prepare myself. It's probably going to be a complete mess. It's probably going to smell like weed. They're probably going to have like blackout curtains because they like to sleep until 12 in the afternoon and they don't go to sleep until 4 a.m. or whatever. I'm not going to be expecting anything good. If someone says, hey, I've got a gay friend, I don't know why people would introduce themselves in this way, but they say, hey, I've got a gay friend, you want to come around their house? I would think there is a reasonable chance that their house would be well put together, that, it's going to be like really like stereotypical, like shoving hey, I just baked some cinnamon buns or something. No, that's probably a little bit much. But they might be doing some baking. I've had a lot more gay people bake than trans-identified people, easily. But you can see the point I'm making, that if essentially the argument I'm making is that if you want to, in some sense, assess whether or not a mental state or an identification is good for somebody, just imagine a window into their lives and what kind of life they're likely to be living. And I think we can all agree, a trans-identified person, if you just look at their life, it's not going to be a happy life. It's not going to be a good life. A gay person, there's a good chance their life will be good, happy. And like I say, there's even a stereotype that gay people have really aspirational, admirable lives where everything's really put together. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Just obvious example that's contradicting his point.
And he has provided none for the claim that they are discriminated against just because they're gender non-conforming. The perpetrator of the discrimination doesn't have to know the gender identity of the person they're discriminating against, since they could just assume that the gender non-conforming person is trans.
Yeah, this just seems like really weird to me, to basically just argue, well, they're being discriminated against for being trans, even though nobody could even know they're trans, because maybe the guy's just assuming they're trans and discriminating against them based on that. But to me, it just seems almost offensive to take this, phobia or kind of disdain for gender nonconformity, which many people who are gender nonconforming experience, and are really negatively affected by it, and basically hijack it and say, this is about trans identity because maybe the people are just assuming that the gender nonconforming individuals are trans. I think it almost seems kind of offensive to me to basically claim someone else's oppression for your own. And to be honest, in this regard, even ignoring potential psychological negatives that might come from medical transition, there are the undeniable physical side effects from medical transition, which are even mentioned. Okay, good. So we've only got about like a few minutes left of the time that I was planning on recording for. We've almost made it to the half an hour mark. I let it play for a little bit because some stuff was said. It was pretty much just repeating points. But now we have me pointing out the physical issues with transition. So I'm going to let the response to this play and see what's said.
King Critical would have to make an argument showing that the physical side effects of medically transitioning somehow outweigh the positive mental health effects of these trans people, to be able to claim that medical transition isn't an overall good.
Technically, I've got 1 minute left until I was planning on stopping recording, but I'll maybe let it run over a bit. Basically, the thing there is that, first of all, those are two very difficult things to weigh against each other. But what I will point out is that a psychological thing is something that basically, and I'm sorry, I do believe this, it is something that in a roundabout way you can choose to have power over. And again, I say this as someone who's had mental health issues, but so, I know people are like, oh, you're just some old man who's like, oh, just, go for a walk and that will fix your depression. No, but you can deal with this stuff. I've dealt with this stuff. And it's I don't want to do the whole like, oh, well, I dealt with it, so, stop complaining about it. I'm saying I dealt with it. So it's really difficult. If someone's going to tell me, I solved my mental health problems by undergoing physical medical treatment, which has serious risk of negative health effects, like negative physical health effects. But I did it so I could solve my mental health issues. It's really, really difficult for me to listen to that when I'm someone who has not solved, but been able to significantly manage my own mental health issues through exercise, through a consistent sleeping pattern, through a healthy, balanced diet, through, getting lots of fresh air, through a routine, through staying hydrated, through all these things, which not only have been very beneficial to my mental health, but are in fact beneficial to my physical health as well. That's the issue. So, again, I really do think my video about mental health in general, which I made a while ago, is a really useful video because it establishes all of this context, right? I'm not saying in a vacuum, oh, let's take these people who are, doing all sorts of stuff that's not generally good for their mental health and just assume that telling them all that they're men and there's nothing they can do about it, or that they're women and there's nothing they can do about it, will fix their mental health. No, what I'm saying is let's normalize the idea that if you have a mental health issue, the first thing you should do is think, what lifestyle changes can you make to make yourself healthier? The next thing you should do is you should really think to yourself, what lifestyle changes can you make to make yourself healthier? The third thing you should do is you should really, really have a good think to yourself. Is there any lifestyle change you can make that will make yourself mentally healthier? And then maybe after that, we can talk about things that would basically be kind of medical intervention. Things that's what we should, rather than what it is currently right now, which is for a lot of people it seems like it's medicate first. And if you even mention the idea that, hey, maybe actually some lifestyle changes would help your mental health, it's almost like people treat you like a bigot, but they certainly treat you like some kind of traditionalist dinosaur for suggesting that. And I think that's a problem, honestly. So yeah, I mean, we made a bit more progress with this video. I think the thing is, there was a lot of stuff that had to be established relating to, I think the main theme of this part was essentially that question of what, the wider context of somebody's whole life and the wider context of society and our attitudes towards mental health and things like that, and how that intersects with this very specific question of what's the best thing to be done about trans identity, and is affirming that trans identity what maximizes happiness. Pretty much every single point in this video can be a summarization of that. So if this video ends up continuing to be about that, then hopefully we'll be able to make even more progress. We've pretty much made it to halfway. Sorry, not halfway, no, half an hour, which is more like a fifth of the way, which is, I guess the one. So at this current rate, this video would end up being 10 parts long. I really do think that we will make more progress more frequently as the video goes on, because I think we'll run into points I've already made, but we'll see. Anyway, for now, I'll just say thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Yeah. Well, I don't know. We'll see if we can make. I'm kind of hoping that we made like only 10 minutes progress last time. We made like 20 minutes progress this time in round numbers. I'm hoping next week we'll be able to make like 30 minutes progress, then 40 minutes progress, then 50 minutes progress. We'll just get better and better and more efficient as it goes on, but we'll see. All right. Bye, everyone. See you next week. Hope you enjoyed.